This lecture is on another critical criminological theory, peacemaking criminology. Pe- Peacemaking criminology was created by Quinney. He explains that suffering is everywhere. Suffering occurs in the home. We can see it on the streets. We can experience it in our minds, and we can feel it in our hearts. He provides a list of many of the ways in which we suffer: abuse, poverty, hunger, homelessness, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, pollution, environmental destruction, debt, disease, terror, and war. Suffering is caused by ignorance, desire, pride, anger, jealousy, greed, and fear. He describes that this suffering is what causes crime and violence. Quinney explains then that we must advance peace and end suffering if we are ever going to reduce crime, and in particular reduce violence. He says the way to advance peace and end suffering is to start with ourselves. In our own lives, we are very busy. We are constantly thinking, I must do this, I must do that, I must do this, I must do that. We consistently try to control what is going on in our lives. He says what we must do is stop. We must contemplate. We must self-reflect. We must meditate. We must be open and ready, and we must be free. Through self-reflection, through meditation, we will be able to identify how we cause suffering to ourselves by judging ourselves or by putting so much pressure on ourselves, and how our actions, the stress that we experience, actually cause others to suffer. So Quinney incorporates Buddhist teachings into criminology through his peacemaking criminological theory. And Dhammapada is one method of meditation that comes from Buddhism. On Beachboard, in your discussion board clips, you will actually learn about how Dhammapada has been used in prisons to allow for self-reflection and reduce suffering to others, particularly through the reduction of infractions. Through self-reflection and meditation, Quinney describes how we could eventually recognize that we can't control others. We can't control how others act. However, we can control how we act. We can control how we respond and how we react to others. So at this point, you should be thinking a little bit about procedural justice, about how we can always control our own behavior and be calm, even when another is being frustrated and angry. He explains that it's easier to do that when we abandon egoism. When we recognize that we are all interrelated, that we are not alone, we are not here alone. Even when we seek to separate, segregate, or ostracize ourselves or others, we are still interrelated. Every action in which we engage affects others. And when our actions are motivated by greed or hatred, or when we live by egoism and power, we inevitably cause suffering. We inevitably create oppression of others. Thus, we must live a socially committed life, a life beyond the self, beyond self-indulgence. We must be compassionate, which means we must respond without grief, without resentment. We must embrace sorrow. We must promote a humane and peaceful existence. Right? We feed the hungry. We shelter the homeless. We provide health care for those who are sick and feeble. We protect those threatened and vulnerable. Right? We step in when people are being hurt. We school the uneducated. We free the oppressed. We promote equality. We want to reduce racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, ageism, all the other isms. So peacemaking then is about bringing peace within ourselves and between people, societies, and nations. When the underlying social harm of suffering is more consistently addressed, we will have less crime. When individuals feel cared for and supported, they are less likely to be involved in crime. So Quinney identifies some important implications for policies. First, he says we must reduce the brutality of the criminal justice system. One example, if you recall from probably one of our first lectures, you reviewed some images of prisons in the United States and throughout the world. And you should have seen how much more brutal our system was, how much more draconian that system was in comparison to prisons in other countries. And yet our recidivism rate is higher than in those other countries, which lends some support to this theory. We also want to curb police brutality. We want to reduce bail for poor defendants. We want to abolish the death penalty. We want to support inmates. The focus again on procedural justice. Quinney argues that the criminal justice system is a violent system. And you can't overcome violence with violence. Thus, nonviolence should be the foundation under which our criminal justice system seeks to reduce recidivism and impose justice. So he also argues that we should implement conflict resolution programs, restorative justice programs, reconciliation programs, and implement laws that promote equality. I hope you see the value of Quinny's theory. And I think you will once you listen to the NPR clips for your discussion.